A poor mountain man inherited an abandoned lodge, but the moment his twins set foot inside, everything changed. What looked like a forgotten shelter in the snow held a hidden lockbox, and inside, a secret worth $100 million. The crack of church bells, the scrape of a deputy's boots on frozen dirt, whispers spreading through a dying frontier town. The poor man thought he'd found hope for his family, but word of silver travels fast. Powerful men want the lodge, and they'll burn records, send gunmen, and tear apart a town to get it. But this lodge holds more than fortune. Buried beneath its beams are papers older than the mayor's schemes, treaties, promises, and truths that could either save the town or destroy it. Now, as rifles rise and snow closes in, one family must fight for survival, faith, and justice on a land claimed by two peoples. Can a poor mountain man protect his twins, defend a stolen promise, and keep hold of a secret worth more than gold? Or will greed and fire take everything from him before spring thaw? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The mule's hooves crunched through crusted snow as Jonas guided the wagon along the winding mountain trail. His twins huddled close beneath a threadbare blanket, their breaths forming small clouds in the bitter air. The letter from the town messenger sat folded in Jonas's coat pocket, its weight both a blessing and a burden. After months of barely scraping by in their tiny cabin, the news of his uncle's passing and the inherited lodge felt like an answer to Rose's quiet prayers. "Pa, look," Nathaniel pointed through the swirling snow. "Is that it up yonder?" Jonas squinted against the fading daylight. The hunting lodge's dark silhouette stood proud against the gray sky, its timber frame a welcome sight after the long day's journey. Though weather-beaten, the structure remained solid, a testament to his uncle's craftsmanship. The broad porch wrapped around three sides, and a stone chimney rose from the steep pitched roof like a sentinel. Rose pressed closer to her brother. "It looks awful big, Pa. Bigger than our old cabin." "That it is, sweetheart." Jonas clucked, too, the mule urging it up the final stretch. The wagon wheels groaned as they carved fresh tracks in the snow. "Your Uncle Matthew built this place back when Silver Ridge was just starting. Used to host hunting parties here before." His voice trailed off, remembering the letter's mention of how the lodge had stood empty these past 5 years. The wind picked up as they approached, whistling through bare branches and rattling loose shutters. Jonas helped Rose down from the wagon, her small boots crunching in the snow. "We've a roof at last," he whispered, more to himself than to his daughter. Nathaniel jumped down on his own, eager to explore. "Can we go inside, Pa?" The boy was already heading for the front steps. His earlier weariness forgotten, Jonas retrieved the iron key from his pocket and had arrived with the letter, wrapped in oilcloth. The lock was stiff with disuse, but it turned with a grinding sound that echoed in the winter quiet. The heavy door swung inward with a creak. Inside, dust motes swirled in the weak light filtering through grimy windows. The main room stretched wide, with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. Wooden chairs sat askew, draped in sheets that had yellowed with time. A broad staircase led to the upper floor, its railing smooth from years of hands sliding along its length. "It needs a good cleaning," Rose observed, running a finger through the dust on a nearby table. "But it's solid." She had their mother's practical nature, always looking for how to make things better. Jonas nodded, already mentally cataloging what needed doing. "First thing's getting a fire going. Nathaniel, help me bring in some wood from the pile I spotted round back. Rose, see if you can find any old lanterns we might get working." They moved with purpose, each task bringing new life to the silent lodge. Jonas and Nathaniel stacked wood by the hearth, while Rose discovered several oil lanterns tucked away in a kitchen cupboard. Soon, A small fire crackled in the massive fireplace, pushing back the shadows and the children as Jonas fed another. Logged to the flames, he studied his children's faces in the flickering light. Rose had settled into one of the cleaned chairs, her thin fingers working at mending a torn sleeve. Nathaniel prowled the edges of the room, peering into corners and testing floorboards with his boot toe. There was color in their cheeks now, and the hollow look that had haunted their eyes these past months seemed less pronounced. "Pa?" Rose's voice was soft. "Do you reckon Ma would have liked it here?" The question caught him off guard, making his chest tighten. He thought of Sarah, of her gentle laugh, and how she'd always wanted a proper home to raise their babies in. "I reckon she would, sweetheart. She always did love a good view of the mountains." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, the wind continued its mournful song, but it couldn't touch them now. They had walls to keep it at bay, a roof to shelter under, and enough room to finally spread out their meager belongings without tripping over one another as the evening deepened. Jonas watched his twins settle into their new space. Rose had found an old broom and was already planning how to make the kitchen serviceable. Nathaniel had claimed a corner of the main room for his bedroll, talking excitedly about fixing up the stable out back for their mule. The lodge might be worn and dusty, but it was more than just shelter. It was a chance to start fresh. Jonas felt something stir in his heart, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long while. It wasn't quite peace, not yet, but it was closer to hope than he'd been since Sarah's passing. Dawn crept over the ridge, painting the snow-covered grounds in pale gold. Jonas stirred the breakfast fire while his twins rubbed sleep from there. Eyes? The cornmeal mush bubbled thick in the iron pot, a humble meal but warm enough to fortify them for the day ahead. "Eat up now," Jonas said, scraping portions into their tin bowls. "Got plenty of work ahead to make this place livable." After breakfast, Jonas began his inspection of their new home. Sunlight streaming through grimy windows revealed the lodge's bones, massive pine beams spanning the ceiling, each one hand-hewn and solid despite the years. His boots creaked across wide plank floors as he tested each board. A steep ladder led to the sleeping loft above, where thick quilts still lay folded in a cedar chest, smelling of age and mothballs. "Pa!" Nathaniel called from across the main room. "There's a trap door here." Jonas crossed to where his son crouched by a heavy iron ring set into the floorboards. Together they heaved it open, revealing rough-cut steps descending into darkness. "Root cellar," Jonas explained, noting the familiar earthy smell. "Your uncle would have stored winter provisions down there." He glanced at Rose, who hovered nearby. "You two can explore it while I fetch water. But mind you don't disturb anything. That might collapse." The frozen creek wasn't far. Jonas could hear its muffled gurgle beneath the ice. He broke through with his axe, filling 2 wooden buckets. The water was so cold, it made his hands ache, but they'd need it for washing. Up the lodge's dust-caked surfaces. When he returned, his twins were practically bouncing with excitement. "Pa, you won't believe what we found." Nathaniel's words tumbled out. Under a loose stone in the cellar wall, there was this old box. Rose held up a rusted metal lockbox, its corners green with corrosion. "We couldn't get it open, though." Jonas set down his buckets and examined their discovery. The lock was solid despite its age, but a few sharp blows from his hammer split it apart. Inside, packaged carefully in oilcloth, lay a bundle of documents, ledgers filled with cramped handwriting, letters sealed with wax, and a large folded map that crackled as Jonas spread it across the table. His breath caught. The map showed Silver Ridge and the surrounding peaks in careful detail, but what drew his eye was the bold line marked in red ink, tracking a vein of ore that ran deep beneath the mountain. Notes in the margins referenced assay reports and estimated values. That made his head spin. "What is it, Pa?" Rose asked, seeing his expression change. Jonas's voice was barely more than a whisper. Silver, a whole load of it, running right under this ridge. He flipped through the accompanying papers, each one confirming what the map showed. According to these reports from back east, there's millions in silver ore down there. Maybe even $100 million worth. The children's eyes went wide. Even they understood the magnitude of such a sum. As evening approached, they sat around the fire eating a simple supper of beans warmed in their tin bowls. The map lay carefully rewrapped in its oilcloth, tucked away in the lockbox, but its existence burned in their minds like the lamplight flickering on the lodge's walls. "Can we tell folks in town?" Nathaniel asked, scraping his bowl clean. "Maybe they'd help us dig it out." "Dig it out?" Jonas shook his head firmly. "No, son. This needs to stay just between us three for now." He looked at each of his children in turn, his expression grave. Not everyone would see our good fortune kindly. Some might try to take advantage, or worse. Rose nodded solemnly, but Nathaniel's face fell with disappointment. "Then what do we do?" "For now, we keep quiet and get this place in order," Jonas said. "We've got a roof over our heads and food enough to get by. That's more than we had yesterday." As night fell, a storm moved in from the mountains. Wind howled around the lodge's corners and rattled the shutters, driving snow against the windows in white sheets. Jonas had tucked the twins into their bedrolls hours ago, but sleep eluded him. He sat in a chair by the dying fire, turning there, situation over in his mind. The silver could mean security for his children, proper schooling, good clothes, enough food to fill out their thin frames. But he'd seen what the promise of riches could do to men's hearts. The thought of claim jumpers or corrupt officials trying to steal their inheritance made his stomach twist. The storm raged on as Jonas kept his vigil, caught between hope for his children's future and dread of what that hope might bring. The map in the lockbox felt like both blessing and curse, and he wondered what his uncle had meant for them to do with it. The storm blew itself out by noon the next day, leaving pristine drifts glittering in the winter sun. Jonas stood on the lodge porch, squinting at the road that wound down toward Silver Ridge. The town's church steeple poked above the trees like a finger pointing to heaven. "Rose, Nathaniel," he called inside. "Get yourselves ready. We're heading into town." The twins emerged bundled in their warmest clothes. Jonas helped them into the wagon, tucking a blanket around their legs. He'd wrapped a lockbox carefully in oilcloth and stowed it under the seat. The mule's hooves crunched through fresh snow. As they started down the mountain, Silver Ridge sprawled across the valley floor, a collection of wooden buildings and muddy streets. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the telegraph office's wire hummed in the crisp air. Jonas guided the wagon past the general store and livery stable, stopping near the whitewashed church. "You two can look around while I speak with the preacher," Jonas told his children. "But stay where folks can see you and don't wander far." Inside the church, Jonas found Reverend Cole organizing hymnals. The preacher's scholarly face brightened at the sight of his visitor. "Jonas Hawley, I'd heard you'd inherited the old lodge." He gestured to a pew. "Please, sit. Tell me what brings you to town." Jonas settled onto the hard wooden bench, the lockbox heavy in his hands. "Need your counsel, Reverend." "About something we found up at the lodge." He explained about the hidden documents and spread the map across the pew between them. The preacher studied the papers, adjusting his wire-rimmed spectacles. "This is quite a discovery," he said quietly. "That silver vein could change lives in this valley if worked properly and fairly." He glanced up. "You'll want to register your claim at the records office straight away." "Reckon that's wise?" Jonas asked. "Some folks might take exception to a mountain man holding such valuable property." "The law's the law," Reverend Cole said firmly. "Better to stake your claim proper than risk losing it altogether." He helped Jonas gather the papers. I'll pray for wisdom and protection for you and those children." Neither man noticed the clerk who'd slipped into the church vestibule, or how quickly he departed after overhearing their conversation. Outside, Rose had wandered toward the schoolyard. Children played in the snow, their shouts carrying on the winter air. She noticed a girl about her age sitting alone on a log fence, watching the others. The girl's dark hair was braided with leather thongs, and her dress showed signs of careful mending. "Hello," Rose said, approaching carefully. "I'm Rose Hollow." The girl studied her with serious eyes. "I am Naya," she answered finally. "You are new here?" Rose nodded, settling beside her on the fence. "We just moved into the old hunting lodge up on the ridge." "I know that place," Naya said. "My people used to camp there before." She trailed off, then asked, "Do you like stories?" "Very much," Rose replied eagerly. The two girls traded tales as the afternoon wore on, Rose sharing her mother's favorite Bible stories while Naya spoke of how Coyote brought fire to the people. Neither paid much attention to the disapproving looks from townspeople passing by Dodd as the sun began to set. Jonas collected his children and headed home. The lodge windows glowed warmly in the gathering dusk, but their peaceful evening was interrupted by the sound of hoofbeats on the porch. Jonas grabbed his rifle just as heavy knocking echoed through the cabin. He opened the door to find a well-dressed man astride an expensive-looking horse. "Evening," the man said smoothly. "I'm Silas Trumbull, mayor of Silver Ridge. Thought I'd ride up and welcome our new neighbors." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "May I come in?" Jonas stood firm in the doorway, rifle casual but ready in his hands. "We were just turning in for the night. This won't take long." The mayor's tone hardened slightly. "Word travels fast in small towns, Mr. Holly. I'd hate to see anything unfortunate happen to you or those fine children of yours." He leaned forward in his saddle. "My advice? Forget about any silver you think you found. This ridge has enough prosperity without stirring up trouble." Jonas said nothing, but his grip tightened on the rifle stock. The threat in Trumbull's words hung clear in the frosty air. "Sleep well," the mayor said finally, turning his horse. "I trust you'll make the wise choice." He rode away into the darkness, leaving Jonas standing rigid in the doorway, watching until the hoofbeats faded. Inside, the twins huddled near the fire, their earlier excitement replaced by worry. Jonas bolted the door and checked the window shutters twice before settling into his chair, rifle across his knees. It would be another sleepless night. Dawn crept over the ridge, painting the snow-laden pines in golden light. Jonas hadn't slept much, the mayor's threats weighing heavy on his mind. But as he watched the sunrise through the lodge's frosted windows, determination settled in his chest like iron. "Time to rise," he called softly to the twins in the loft. Nathaniel and Rose stirred in their blankets, yawning as they climbed down the wooden ladder. After a simple breakfast of biscuits and coffee, Jonas spread the ledgers across the heavy oak table. His fingers traced the careful columns of numbers and dates, piecing together the story they told. The silver vein wasn't just valuable. It was vast, stretching deep beneath the ridge like God's own treasure house. "Nathaniel," he said, looking up from his work, "that mule needs tending. Make sure she's got fresh hay and water." The boy nodded eagerly, pulling on his coat. He loved caring for their sturdy mule, treating her more like a friend than a beast of burden. Rose moved about the lodge with quiet purpose, sweeping away decades of dust and arranging their few belongings. The main room already looked more welcoming, with a cheerful fire crackling in the hearth and curtains she'd hung from flour sacks at the windows. Near midday, voices and the crunch of wagon wheels sounded outside. Jonas reached for his rifle, but relaxed when he recognized Reverend Cole's gentle call. "Hello, the lodge." The preacher wasn't alone. A tall woman in a sensible dress and wool coat stood beside him, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Jonas Hawley, Reverend." Cole said, "I'd like you to meet Miss Margaret Fuller, our schoolteacher. When I told her about your situation, she insisted on coming up to offer help." Miss Fuller's handshake was firm. "This town needs good people, Mr. Hawley," she said plainly. "And that silver of yours might be just what saves it." They gathered around the table while Rose served coffee in tin cups. Miss Fuller explained how Silver Ridge had been dying slowly since the first mines played out. "Families are leaving every month," she said. "The school is down to 15 children. But a new silver strike worked proper and fair." Her eyes gleamed with hope. "My Sarah, my late wife, she had dreams for this place," Jonas said quietly. The twins grew still, hearing their mother mentioned. She always said a lodge like this should shelter those who need it most. Orphans, widows, folks down on their luck. Reverend Cole nodded. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, Jonas. Perhaps He guided you here for just such a purpose." They talked through the afternoon, making plans. The teacher knew mining law, while the preacher had connections with honest lawyers in Denver. Both promised to stand with Jonas against whatever pressure the mayor might bring Dodd as sunset approached. Rose slipped outside while the adults were deep in discussion. She knew where to find Naya. They'd arranged to meet at the old lightning struck pine halfway between town and lodge. The Ute girl was already waiting, wrapped in a warm blanket. "I brought you something," she said, holding out a small deerskin pouch. Inside were dried berries, sweet and tart. "Thank you," Rose said, sharing the treat between them. They sat together on a fallen log, their breath making clouds in the cold air. "My grandfather used to hunt these slopes," Naya said after a while. "He tells stories of how our people would camp near your lodge in summer, following the deer herds." She gestured at the ridgeline. "The old ones say there are sacred places up there, where the earth's heart beats close to the surface." Rose listened intently. "You mean the silver? Did your people know about it?" "They knew the mountain held power," Naya said. "But they sought different treasures than your people do." She smiled slightly. "Grandfather says the lodge was built with respect, though. The man who made it asked permission from our chiefs first." "I'll tell my father," Rose promised. "He'd want to know that history." When Rose returned, she found Jonas and the visitors preparing to leave. Miss Fuller had drawn up a list of tasks for the next day, while Reverend Cole promised to return with supplies from his church's storehouse. After their guests departed, Jonas gathered his children close. "Time for prayers," he said softly. They knelt together beside the lamp, its gentle light casting long shadows on the log walls. "Lord," Jonas began, his voice rough with emotion, "we ask for wisdom in the days ahead. Show us how to use this blessing rightly. Help us honor Sarah's memory and make this place a refuge, as she dreamed." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "And Lord, help us trust in your protection when the path seems dark." "Amen," the twins whispered together. The lamp flickered, and outside an owl called into the gathering night. The morning frost crackled under Jonas's boots as he and Nathaniel prepared for their ride into Silver Ridge. The lockbox sat heavy in his saddlebag, its contents worth more than most men would see in 10 lifetimes. Dawn had barely broken, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold. "Ready, son?" Jonas asked, checking the cinch on Nathaniel's saddle one last time. "Yes, sir." Nathaniel sat straight and proud on his pony, trying to match his father's serious expression. They rode in comfortable silence, hooves crunching through patches of snow. The town was just stirring to life when they arrived. Shopkeepers sweeping porches, the smell of fresh bread wafting from the bakery, morning prayers drifting from the church. The records office occupied a narrow brick building next to the bank. Inside, coal dust from the potbelly stove hung in the air, and rows of leather-bound books lined the walls. The clerk, a thin man named Mr. Perkins, jumped when they entered, nearly knocking over his inkwell. "Good morning," Jonas said, setting the lockbox on the counter. "I need to file a mineral claim." Perkins's hand shook as he reached for the papers Jonas laid out. His eyes darted between the documents and the door. "Everything seems to be in order," he stammered, reaching for his official stamp, while the clerk recorded the claim. Jonas watched him closely. Something wasn't right. The man's neck was flushed red, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the morning chill. "There you are, Mr. Hawley," Perkins said, handing back the stamped papers. "All properly filed." Jonas nodded his thanks, tucking the documents safely away. But as he and Nathaniel mounted up outside, he glimpsed Perkins slipping out the office's back door, heading toward the mayor's house at a near run. "Pa?" Nathaniel asked, noticing his father's frown. "Keep your eyes sharp, son," Jonas murmured. They rode slowly down the main street, past the general store and saloon. Near the livery stable, Jonas reined in suddenly. Mayor Trumbull stood in the shadow of the barn, speaking in low tones with three rough-looking men. All wore gun belts, and their horses were equipped for hard riding. As Jonas watched, money changed. "Hands, let's head home," he said quietly to Nathaniel. They turned their mounts toward the ridge, but Jonas could feel eyes boring into his back all the way out of town. The lodge looked welcoming when they returned, smoke curling from the chimney, where Rose tended the fire. She met them at the door, excitement bright in her eyes. "Pa, I need to tell you something important," she said as they removed their coats. "It's about what Naya told me yesterday." Jonas listened intently as Rose explained about the Ute people's history with the lodge and the mountain. How they had considered the ridge sacred ground, how the original builder had sought their blessing first. "She said her grandfather still tells stories about hunting here," Rose finished. "It seems wrong not to honor that somehow." Jonas sank into his chair by the fire, troubled thoughts churning. The silver claim was legal by white man's law, but what of the deeper justice? These mountains had sustained Naya's people for generations, before any deed was ever written. "You're right, Rose," he said finally. "If we profit from this land, we owe something to those who came before." He remembered Sarah's gentle ways, how she'd always found room in her heart for others. "We'll need to think on how to make this right." That night, after the twins were asleep in the loft, Jonas dozed in his chair by the dying fire. In his dreams, Sarah came to him, as real as life. She wore the blue dress she'd loved, and her eyes held the same kindness he remembered. "Jonas," she said softly, "you know what's right. Do it, even when it costs." He woke with a start, her words still echoing in his mind. But something else had roused him, an acrid smell that wasn't from their banked hearth. Jonas strode to the window, his heart dropping at what he saw. Against the star-filled sky, an orange glow lit the horizon where Silver Ridge lay. Smoke rose in a dark column, visible even in the night. Something in town was burning. The sight filled Jonas with dread. Between the clerk's nervous behavior, the mayor's hired guns, and now this fire, trouble was brewing. But Sarah's words in his dream steadied him. Whatever came next, he would face it with truth and honor. For his children's sake, for the Pania memory of his wife, and for the justice owed to all who called these mountains home. Jonas burst through the lodge door, startling Rose from her sleep by the fire. "Get your coats," he ordered, already gathering supplies. "There's trouble in town." The three Hales rushed to hitch the wagon, their breath clouding in the cold night air. The mule stomped nervously as Jonas urged it forward, taking the ridge trail as fast as he dared in the darkness. Rose clutched her brother's arm while Jonas kept his eyes fixed on the growing orange glow ahead. When they crested the final hill above Silver Ridge, flames lit the sky like an angry sunrise. The records office blazed at the heart of town, sparks dancing upward in the winter wind. A crowd had gathered, passing buckets of water in a desperate chain. But the fire had too strong a hold. Jonas pulled the wagon to a stop near the church. "Stay here," he told the twins, but Nathaniel jumped down before he could stop him. "I can help, Pa." The boy insisted, already running toward the bucket line. The heat struck Jonas like a wall as he approached the burning building. Smoke burned his eyes and throat while he searched for a way inside. Sheriff Mills grabbed his arm. "It's too far gone, Holly," the lawman warned, but Jonas shook him off. "My claim papers are in there." He pushed forward, ducking under a timber. The interior was hell itself, flames crawling up walls, smoke thick as soup. Jonas covered his mouth with his bandana and pressed deeper. Through the smoke, he glimpsed the record shelf, now mostly ash. His heart sank as he sifted through. Charred paper fragments. Nothing remained of his filed claim. A sharp crack overhead made him look up. "Pa!" Nathaniel's voice came from nearby. Too nearby. The boy had followed him in. "Get out!" Jonas shouted, but another crack drowned his words. A burning beam crashed down, catching Nathaniel's arm as he tried to dodge. The boy's scream cut through the roar of flames. Jonas lunged forward, scooping up his son. Pain forgotten, Nathaniel clutched his father's neck as Jonas carried him through the inferno. They burst out into clean air, both coughing violently. Blood soaked Nathaniel's shirt sleeve where the beam had struck. Someone fetched Dr. Warren. Rose cried, running to meet them. She helped Jonas lay her brother on a church pew while folks gathered round. "Stand back. Give the boy air," Reverend Cole ordered. Bringing clean water and cloths, the crowd parted as Mayor Trumbull strode up, his face hard in the firelight. "Interesting timing, Holly," he said loudly. "Your claim papers burn the same. Might you file them?" Jonas straightened, still keeping one hand on Nathaniel's good shoulder. "What are you suggesting?" "Those silver maps you showed the clerk. Obvious forgeries." Trumbull's voice carried to every ear in the crowd. "I reckon. You started this fire yourself to hide the evidence." "That's a lie." Rose stepped forward, but Jonas gently moved her aside. "You know better, Trumbull," Jonas said quietly. "This fire serves your interests, not mine." The mayor smiled coldly. "Prove it. Where are your original documents now?" Before Jonas could answer, Dr. Warren arrived. The physician's examination of Nathaniel's arm drew Jonas's attention away from Trumbull's accusations. "A clean break," Warren announced after gentle prodding that made Nathaniel wince. "It'll heal well if properly set." He began splinting the arm while Rose held her brother's hand. The crowd slowly dispersed as the fire died to embers. Jonas felt their stares, heard their whispers. The mayor had planted his poison well. Who would believe a mountain man over Silver Ridge's leading citizen? Dawn was breaking by the time they loaded Nathaniel carefully into the wagon. The boy's face was pale but brave as Rose tucked blankets around him. Jonas climbed up to the driver's seat, bone-weary and smoke-stained. "You can't win this fight, Holly," Trumbull called after them. "Take your children and leave Silver Ridge while you still can." The ride home was silent, except for the wagons, creaking and Nathaniel's occasional sharp breath when they hit a bump. Inside the lodge, Jonas helped his son settle into the bed they'd moved down from the loft. The morning light streaming through the windows seemed to mock their dark situation. Rose brought her brother water, then turned to Jonas with tears in her eyes. "We can't leave, Pa. This is our home now. Ma would want us to stay and fight." Jonas gripped her small hand in his calloused one, studying the determination in her face so like her mother's. But for the first time since receiving his uncle's letter, he didn't know how to move forward. The silver claim was ashes, his son was injured, and the whole town likely believed him a fraud and arsonist. Rose squeezed his fingers. "Ma always Said truth wins out if we're patient enough. Jonas nodded, though his heart was heavy. His daughter's faith might be stronger than his own right now, but he had to find a way forward for both his children's sake. The next 2 days brought heavy snow that sealed the lodge in white silence. Wind piled drifts against the walls, while Jonas split logs until his arms ached, determined to keep the hearth well fed. Between checking on Nathaniel and stoking the fire, he watched the weather with worried eyes. They had supplies enough for now, but being cut off from town left them vulnerable. Nathaniel dozed often, the break in his arm keeping him unusually still. Jonas changed the splint wrappings twice daily, grateful that at least the skin hadn't broken. His son's usual restless energy was trapped in bed, though Rose tried to keep his spirits up with stories and checkers games played awkwardly with his left hand. On the second afternoon, while Jonas napped in the chair by Nathaniel's bed, Rose heard a soft tapping at the kitchen door. She opened it to find Naya, her dark hair dusted with snow, carrying a cloth-wrapped bundle. "My father's hunting was blessed," Naya whispered, revealing strips of dried venison. "And grandmother sent these herbs for your brother's pain." Rose hugged her friend, pulling her inside where the fire's warmth could thaw her cheeks. "You shouldn't have come in such weather," she scolded, though gratitude shone in her eyes. While Rose brewed the herbs into tea, Naya settled cross-legged by the hearth. "I have been thinking about this place," she said slowly. "My grandfather used to tell stories of your uncle before the silver fights began. He was different from other settlers. He respected our people's ways." Rose leaned forward, curious. "What kind of stories?" "Grandfather said your uncle kept important papers, hidden in the lodge itself. He feared some men in town would try to steal them." Naya's voice dropped lower. "Papers about land rights and promises made. But we searched everywhere when we first came." Rose protested. Nay shook her head. "Not everywhere. The old ones say there are spaces between spaces in these walls." That evening, after Jonas had checked the animals and brought in more wood, Rose told him what she'd learned. "We have to look again, Pa," she insisted. Naya wouldn't tell stories without reason. Jonas studied his daughter's earnest face, then glanced at Nathaniel, who had pushed himself up on his good elbow with interest. "Reckon there's no harm in trying," he said finally, "though I don't fancy getting our hopes up." They lit 3 lanterns and descended the cellar steps, their shadows stretching tall against the earth walls. Jonas ran his hands along the rough-hewn timbers, while Rose and Nathaniel searched the opposite side, testing for loose boards. "Here," Rose called suddenly. "This panel sounds different." She rapped her knuckles against a section of wall, producing a hollow echo. Jonas examined the spot carefully. The board seemed ordinary enough, but when he pressed one edge, it gave slightly. Working his knife into the seam, he managed to pry it loose. Behind the panel gaped a narrow space, barely wider than his shoulders. Jonas held his lantern closer, revealing a leather bundle pushed far back against the earth. His hands trembled slightly as he worked it free. The leather was old but well-oiled, tied with rawhide and sealed with wax. Jonas broke the seal carefully while the twins crowded close, their lantern light pooling together. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay several documents. Jonas unfolded them with reverent care. The first was the original deed to the lodge, his uncle's name clear in fading ink. But it was the second document that made his breath catch, a treaty acknowledgement signed by both town officials and Ute leaders, confirming traditional hunting rights on the ridge. The very paper that had vanished from town records years ago, when the silver disputes began. "It's proof," Jonas whispered, sinking to his knees on the packed earth floor. "Proof of everything. Our claim to the lodge, the Utes' rights to the land." His voice grew thick. "Your uncle didn't just leave us shelter. He left us truth." Rose wrapped her arms around her father's broad shoulders, while Nathaniel pressed close on his other side, cradling his splinted arm. The three lanterns cast there, light on the papers that could change everything, not just for their family, but for Naya's people too. Ma would say this was God's timing, Rose said softly, waiting until we had Naya's help to find it. Jonas pulled both his children closer, careful of Nathaniel's injury. The weight of the documents in his hands felt like hope itself, solid and real as the timber walls around them. Their uncle's final gift wasn't just silver under the ridge. It was the power to make things right. Jonas rose before the sun, his movements quiet as he checked on his sleeping children. The documents from the cellar lay carefully wrapped in oilcloth, tucked inside his coat. Outside, the eastern sky held just a hint of gray, promising another clear, cold day. He had arranged for Naya's family to watch over Nathaniel and Rose at their camp outside town. Though some might question trusting Indian neighbors, Jonas knew the Ute people valued kinship above all. Through Rose's friendship with Naya, that circle of trust now extended to his own family. The twins stirred as he gently shook them awake. "Time to go," he whispered. "Bundle up warm now." Rose helped Nathaniel with his coat, careful of his splinted arm. They ate a quick breakfast of cornbread and coffee, the lodge silent except for the scrape of spoons and crackle of the morning fire. Jonas checked his rifle before slinging it across his back, not looking for trouble, but ready all the same. The sun was just cresting the ridge as they reached Naya's family camp. Her father greeted them with dignity, gesturing toward the warm tent where Naya waited with her mother. Rose hugged Jonas tight before ducking inside, while Nathaniel gripped his father's hand. "You be careful, Pa," Nathaniel said, his young face serious. "I aim to be," Jonas replied, ruffling his son's hair. "Mind your arm and listen to Naya's folks." The ride into Silver Ridge took longer than usual. Jonas kept to the tree line, watching for the mayor's men. The documents pressed against his chest like a breastplate of truth. He thought of his late wife, how she would have handled this day with quiet grace. The memory steadied him. At the church, Reverend Cole was already awake, reading by lamplight. The preacher's eyes widened at the sight of the papers Jonas spread across his desk. The schoolteacher arrived soon after, summoned by an urgent note. "These are genuine," the teacher whispered, examining the careful script. The deed, the treaty, acknowledgement, everything the mayor claimed never existed. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Reverend Cole said softly, "finding these now when the town needs truth most." He looked at Jonas. "We'll stand with you, whatever comes." They spent the morning planning. The documents would be presented during Sunday service when most of the town gathered. The mayor couldn't silence them all. The word traveled fast in Silver Ridge. By afternoon, Jonas saw clusters of the mayor's supporters gathering in the street, their faces dark with threat. One of the mayor's hired guns made a point of cleaning his revolver while seated on the church steps. As shadows lengthened, more men arrived. They lounged against hitching posts, blocked the church entrance. Their message was clear. There would be no Sunday service, no public reading of inconvenient truths. Jonas rode home as dusk painted the mountains purple. His heart was heavy, but his spine was straight. The mayor might have men and money, but Jonas had right on his side. And maybe, he thought, remembering his wife's faith, something more. At Naya's camp, he found the children safe, even cheerful. Rose had spent the day learning beadwork while Nathaniel listened to hunting stories from Naya's uncles. The simple kindness of these supposed savages stood in stark contrast to the town's corruption. Back at the lodge, Jonas built up the fire while the twins spread blankets on the floor nearby. None of them wanted separate beds tonight. Rose brewed coffee while Nathaniel arranged their supper of beans and dried apple slices. "Tell us true, Pa," Nathaniel said as they settled by the hearth. What's coming tomorrow? Jonas studied their young faces in the firelight. They deserved honesty. Could be justice, he said slowly. Could be ruin. The mayor's men mean to stop the church service, stop us speaking truth about the silver and the treaty rights. But we're not running, Rose said. It wasn't a question. No, child, we're not running. Jonas wrapped an arm around each twin. Your ma would say there's things worth standing for, even when standing's hard. This lodge, this land, it's meant for more than just us. It's meant to make right what's been wrong too long. The twins nestled closer. Soon their breathing grew steady with sleep, trusting their father would keep watch. Jonas stayed awake, listening to the night sounds through the lodge's thick walls. Every so often, hoofbeats echoed from the road. The mayor's watchers riding past, making sure Jonas knew he was marked. But with his children's warmth beside him and the hidden documents safe, Jonas felt a strange peace. Tomorrow would bring what it brought. For tonight, it was enough to know they faced it together, with clean hearts and clear purpose. Sunday morning crept over the mountains in shades of iron and slate. Jonas adjusted Rose's shawl as they prepared to leave the lodge, his fingers trembling. Slightly despite the calm he forced into his voice. Stay close today, he told the twins. Nathaniel nodded, his splinted arm tucked carefully inside his coat. The path to Silver Ridge wound through stands of bare aspen, their branches clicking like worried whispers in the winter wind. Reverend Cole met them at the fork in the road, his Bible clutched tight against his chest. The preacher's eyes held both fear and faith as he fell in beside their wagon. The Lord goes before us, Cole murmured, though his knuckles were white on the reins of his horse. The church bell began to toll as they approached town, its deep voice rolling across the valley. Jonas watched townspeople emerge from their homes, and businesses drawing their coats close against the morning chill. Some hurried toward the church while others lingered in doorways. Uncertain Mayor Trumbull arrived just as Jonas helped Rose down from the wagon. The mayor's boot heels struck the wooden steps with deliberate force, his men fanning out behind him like dark wings. Jonas counted 4 gunmen, their weapons poorly concealed beneath heavy coats. Inside, the church filled quickly. Lamplight caught the worry on people's faces as they slipped into the hard wooden pews. Jonas guided his children to a front seat, the oilskin package heavy against his chest. Rose reached for his hand, her small fingers warm and steady. Reverend Cole mounted. The pulpit first, opening with a prayer for wisdom and courage. Then he gestured to Jonas, who rose slowly to his feet. The floorboards creaked beneath his boots as he walked forward. Each step measured and final. Jonas drew out the documents with careful hands, smoothing them against the pulpit's worn wood. His voice, when it came, carried to every corner of the hushed room. These papers speak truth that some have tried to burn away, he began. This here's the original deed to the hunting lodge, signed and witnessed proper. He held up the first document. And this, he lifted the second, is a treaty acknowledgement, recording the Ute people's ancestral rights to hunt these lands. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Mayor Trumbull's face darkened like an approaching storm. Forgeries. The mayor's voice cracked through the air like a whip. That man's desperate enough to fake documents. Now he's dragging Indian superstition into it. He gestured sharply, and his men started forward, hands moving toward their guns. The church door swung wide. Naya entered first, her head high. Behind her came 3 tribal elders, their faces weathered as the mountains themselves. They moved, with quiet dignity down the center aisle, coming to stand beside Jonas at the pulpit. The eldest, his silver hair caught in long braids, spoke in careful English. These marks, he pointed to symbols inked along the treaty paper's edge, tell our people's story on this land. Here is the Bear Clan sign. Here, the mark of running river band. We remember when your words were put to paper, when promises were made. A second elder nodded. Our fathers witnessed this. The story lives in our memories, passed down true. The congregation stirred like wind through prairie grass. Jonas saw the schoolteacher stand, then others' faces he recognized from town, honest folk who'd stayed quiet too long under the mayor's thumb. Their resolve seemed to strengthen as truth took root. But Mayor Trumbull's men shouldered forward, rough hands reaching for Jonas and the documents. Rose cried out. Nathaniel struggled to his feet, good arm raised in protest. Let us pray. Reverend Cole's voice cut through the chaos, firm as a father's command to quarreling children. O Lord, who brings light to darkness and truth to troubled hearts. The gunman hesitated, years of ingrained respect for church and preachers staying their hands. In that moment of pause, more townspeople stood. They moved to form a wall between Jonas and the mayor's men, faces set with newfound purpose. Jonas felt something swell in his chest, not pride. Exactly, but the clean, clear feeling of right, prevailing over wrong. He looked down at the documents that had cost so much and nearly been lost so many times. Their age-yellowed pages held more than just words and signatures. They held hope for a better way, for justice to grow where greed had taken root. The truth stood exposed now, like a vein of silver revealed by spring melt. Jonas watched it work through the crowd, saw it shine in their eyes as they chose sides not by fear, but by conscience. Even some who had backed the mayor began to shift away, leaving him increasingly isolated with his hired guns. The mayor's face twisted with rage. Without another word, he spun on his heel and stormed from the church, his boots thundering down the wooden steps. His men trailed after him like shadows fleeing sunrise. The slam of the heavy door echoed through the sanctuary. Jonas let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. Reverend Cole's hand settled warm on his shoulder. Best get your family somewhere safe tonight, the preacher advised quietly. A cornered snake strikes hardest. Naya's father stepped forward, speaking in measured tones. Come to our camp. Share our fire. Jonas nodded gratefully, but Rose tugged at his sleeve. Pa, what if we all went to the lodge instead? It's bigger, and she glanced at Naya, hope bright in her eyes. The tribal elders conferred briefly in their own tongue. Naya's mother smiled. The lodge stands between town and our hunting grounds, a good place to watch both ways. As afternoon settled into evening, an unusual gathering filled the old lodge. Jonas stoked the hearth fire while Rose and Naya's mother stirred a thick venison stew. The rich aroma mixed with wood smoke and the sharp scent of pine boughs the children had gathered to freshen the air. Nathaniel sat with Naya's uncle, learning to wrap his splint more comfortably with soft deerskin. The man's clever fingers worked the leather while he shared stories of healing herbs that grew on the ridge. When the stew was ready, they gathered around the fire. Wooden bowls passed from hand to hand. Rose started humming softly as she ate, a hymn their mother had loved. Soon Naya joined in, then others, the blend of voices rising to the rafters like prayer. Jonas looked around the circle of fire-lit faces, his children, their new friends, this mixing of two people sharing food and song. For the first time since inheriting the lodge, he saw past its weathered walls to what it could become. A sanctuary for those in need, just as his wife had dreamed. He could almost hear her voice in the harmony of the hymns. There's room here, he said during a lull. In the singing, room for widows who've lost their way, for children who need shelter. He gestured to the broad main room, the sleeping loft above. With the silver claim, we could fix it proper, make it a real home. Naya's grandfather nodded slowly. A good vision. The lodge has always been a gathering place. Better to fill it with hope than leave it empty. The evening deepened. Stories flowed like water, bridges building between cultures. Laughter echoed from the log walls, warming them more surely than the fire. Even Nathaniel's pain seemed eased by the fellowship. But near midnight, the peace shattered like glass. Rifle shots cracked through the windows, sending everyone diving for cover. Rose screamed as shards rained down. Jonas grabbed his rifle and crawled to the broken window. Dark shapes moved in. The moonlight. The smell of smoke reached him moments before orange flames leaped up the side of the barn. The horses. Nathaniel tried to rise, but Jonas pushed him back. Stay down. He turned to Naya's uncle, who already had his own rifle ready. Cover me while I get to the well. Jonas burst through the door, keeping low. More shots kicked up dirt around him as he ran for the well. His hands shook as he filled the bucket, but determination steadied them. Behind him, Naya's uncle's rifle spoke twice. A horse screamed in the darkness, followed by cursing and the thunder of retreating hooves. Jonas threw bucket after bucket of water on the barn wall. The flames hissed and died, leaving only scorched wood and the acrid stench of smoke. His heart pounded as he checked the horses, frightened but unharmed. Back inside, Rose clutched Nathaniel, both children pale with fear. The broken windows let in the bitter night air. Jonas gathered his twins close, feeling them tremble. Ain't right, Naya's uncle spat, reloading his rifle, shooting at children, using fire in the dark. Jonas looked around at the shattered glass, the bullet holes in the walls, the faces of his children. Something hardened inside him, like steel being forged. No more hiding, he declared, his voice filling the lodge. We'll meet this head-on. Tomorrow we'll board up these windows proper, post watches. He straightened his shoulders. This lodge will stand, and so will we. Naya's father clasped his arm in agreement. Together, your fight is our fight now. Rose pressed closer to her father's side. Like Ma always said, do right, even when it costs. Jonas kissed the top of her head, heart swelling with love and determination. The lodge had become more than just shelter. It was a symbol of hope worth defending. As his friends moved to help cover the broken windows, Jonas knew that whatever came next, they would face it as Family Dawn painted the snow-covered peaks in shades of rose and gold as Jonas cinched his saddle tight. The leather creaked in the morning cold. He had wrapped the precious documents in oilcloth and tucked them secure inside his coat, close to his heart. You sure about this, Pa? Nathaniel stood in the doorway, his splinted arm cradled against his chest. Behind him, Rose and Naya peered out with worried eyes. Gotta be done, Jonas replied, checking his rifle in its scabbard. Captain Dent's a fair man, from what folks say. Maybe he can help make this right. Naya's uncle had agreed to stay with the children, his own rifle ready. The lodge windows were now protected with sturdy planks, though morning light still filtered. Through the cracks, Jonas mounted up, testing the reins. We'll keep watch, Rose promised, her chin set brave and determined. Just like you showed us. Jonas nodded, his throat tight with pride and worry. Mind your uncle's words, he reminded them. I'll be back before dark, God willing. The trail south wound through stands of pine and aspen. Melting snow made the going treacherous. His horse picked its way carefully around muddy patches and half-hidden rocks. Every few minutes, Jonas touched his chest where the documents lay, reassuring himself they were safe. The morning wore on. Jonas passed other travelers, a freight wagon mired axle-deep in mud, a pair of traders leading pack mules, a mail rider. Spurring his mount through the slush, each nodded greeting but kept their distance. The way of the frontier dot by midday. The wooden walls of the army post came into view. The American flag snapped in the wind above the gate. 2 sentries stood. Watch, their blue uniforms stark against the weathered logs. Jonas dismounted, leading his horse forward. State your business, the older sentry called. "Need to see Captain Dent," Jonas replied. "Got legal papers requiring federal attention." The younger sentry disappeared inside the gate. Minutes later, he returned with a sergeant who escorted Jonas to the captain's office. The room was spare but orderly. A desk, a few chairs, maps on the walls. Behind the desk sat Captain Hiram Dent, his bearing as crisp as his uniform. "What brings you 15 miles through spring mud, Mr. Hawley?" The captain's tone was neutral but not unkind. Jonas carefully withdrew the oilcloth package. As he spread the documents on the desk, he explained everything. The inheritance, the silver claim, the mayor's threats, the attack on the lodge. The captain listened without interruption, only his deepening frown showing his thoughts. When Jonas finished, Captain Dent studied the papers closely. "These appear genuine," he said at last. "The treaty marks match our records. But you understand I can't simply march troops into town on your word alone." "Not asking for that, sir," Jonas replied. "Just need help getting word to the proper authorities. Making sure these documents get recorded where they can't be burned or buried." The captain nodded slowly. "That much I can do." He rose and walked to the telegraph key in the corner. "I'll send word to the Federal Land Office in Denver today. They'll want to investigate, given the silver's value. But it may take weeks for agents to arrive." "Weeks we may not have," Jonas said quietly. "True enough." Captain Dent returned to his desk. "I'll include a note about the violence. Might speed things up." Meanwhile, he pulled out a sheet of paper and began writing. "This states you've filed these claims with Army authority. Not legally binding, but it might give that mayor pause." Jonas accepted the captain's letter gratefully. "Much obliged, sir." "Watch yourself, Hawley," the captain advised as Jonas gathered the documents. "Men do desperate things when money's involved, especially that much money." The return journey seemed longer, shadows stretching as afternoon waned. Jonas pushed his tired horse as much as he dared on the treacherous trail. His muscles ached from hours in the saddle, but worry for his children drove him on. The sun hung low when he finally topped the last rise. His heart lifted at the sight of smoke rising straight and peaceful from the lodge chimney. As he rode into the yard, the door flew open. Rose and Nathaniel ran out to meet him, Naya close behind. "Pa, you're back." Rose helped him dismount while Nathaniel took the reins. "Any trouble?" Jonas asked, scanning their faces. "Quiet as Sunday prayers," Naya's uncle reported from the doorway. Not even a fox stirred. Inside, the lodge was warm and welcoming. Someone had swept the floors and laid fresh pine boughs in the corners. A pot of beans simmered on the hearth. Jonas shared his news as they ate, showing them the captain's letter. "So, now we wait?" Nathaniel asked. "Now we wait," Jonas agreed, "and trust in the Lord's timing." After supper, they knelt together by the fire. Jonas led them in prayer, asking for protection and patience. As they rose, a wolf's lonely howl echoed from the ridge. Another answered, then another, their wild song filling the darkness beyond the lodge walls. Rose shivered, pressing close to her father. But Jonas smiled, drawing both his children near. "Even the wolves run in families," he said softly, watching over their own, "just like we do." Through the planked windows, lamplight glowed steady and warm, a beacon of hope in the gathering night. 7 long days crept by at the lodge, each sunrise bringing new challenges. The spring thaw had begun in earnest, turning snow to slush and making the yard a maze of mud puddles. Inside, Nathaniel sat by the window, his splinted arm propped on a pillow while he watched birds return to the high branches. "Looks better today," Jonas said, carefully checking the binding. The swelling had gone down, and color returned to his son's fingers. Another week of rest should do it. Outside, Rose's laughter mingled with Naya's as they gathered firewood. From the clearing, the two girls had grown inseparable, working side by side to help both families. Their arms full of kindling, they often paused to study plants pushing through the melting snow. Naya taught Rose which herbs could ease fever or settle an upset stomach, knowledge passed down through generations. This one helps wounds heal, Naya explained, pointing to a small green shoot. My grandmother says it grows best where the elk bed down. The lodge itself seemed to wake from its winter sleep. Jonas repaired broken shutters and patched the roof where snow had damaged it. Word spread through Silver Ridge about the mountain man who welcomed those in need. First came widow Sarah Blake with her 3 small children, their clothes threadbare, seeking shelter after losing their home to debt. We ain't got much, Jonas told them, but there's room by the fire and beans in the pot. More followed. 2 orphan brothers whose uncle had died in a mining accident. An elderly couple forced from their farm. Each brought what little they owned, a blanket, some cornmeal, a few precious books. The lodge's great room grew crowded but warm with shared purpose. Food became their greatest worry. Jonas stretched every meal, but supplies dwindled faster than expected. He watched the children's portions grow smaller, though they never complained. Rose learned to make soup from whatever Naya's family could spare, adding wild onions and early greens to the broth. Just like your ma would have done, Jonas told her softly one evening, watching her stir the pot. She always found a way to feed whoever came to our door. The night the mayor rode by, most were already asleep. His horse's hooves thundered past, voice carrying sharp and cruel through the darkness. You're asking for trouble, Holly. Ain't nobody going to help you when it comes. Jonas stood at the window, rifle ready, until the sounds faded. But the threat left him sleepless, doubt gnawing at his heart. How could he protect so many? What right did he have to risk their safety for his stand against corruption? Pa? Rose's voice came quiet in the darkness. She sat beside him, her small hand finding his. Remember what Ma used to say? About what makes a real home? Jonas closed his eyes, hearing Catherine's voice as clear as yesterday. A home is not walls, but what you do for others inside them. She was right, Rose whispered. Look around, Pa. In the dim light of banked coals, Jonas saw what his daughter meant. Bodies curled close for warmth, children peaceful in sleep. Sarah Blake mending clothes by moonlight. The old couple sharing their last jar of preserved peaches with the mining orphans at supper. Even in their need, they cared for one. Another dot the next morning. Jonas gathered everyone after breakfast. Times are hard, he admitted. Mayor and his men might make them harder still. Any who want to leave, I understand. But this lodge was meant for sharing, and its doors stay open while I draw breath. Sarah Blake stood first. We're staying, she said firmly. Better to face trouble together than alone. One by one, the others nodded. The elderly farmer gripped his wife's hand. Ain't had real neighbors in years, he said. Feels like family now. That afternoon, more came seeking shelter. Jonas welcomed them with what little they had left, trusting in God's provision. Rose and Naya taught the younger children to find early strawberry leaves while Nathaniel, arm, healing, showed the older ones how to set snares for rabbits. The lodge transformed, its rooms alive with purpose. Women shared skills, cooking, sewing, medicine. Men repaired tools and swapped stories. Children played together, forgetting their losses in games and chores. Even the mayor's threats seemed to lose power against their united strength. Wealth ain't just silver in the ground, Jonas mused that evening, watching Rose lead the youngest ones in a song her mother had taught her. The familiar tune rose sweet and clear, filling the lodge with hope. No, Nathaniel agreed, his splinted arm forgotten as he helped the mining orphans with their reading. Reckon man knew that all along. In the corner, Naya's family shared tea made from spring herbs, its rich aroma mixing with wood smoke and fresh bread. Outside, snow continued to melt, revealing the promise of green beneath. Inside, the lodge held something far more precious than any silver vein, the true wealth of compassion, given and received in equal measure. Jonas stood in the packed courthouse, sunlight streaming through tall windows. 2 weeks of anxious waiting had led to this moment. Federal land agents in pressed uniforms flanked the judge's bench, while soldiers stood at attention near the doors. "Present your evidence, Mr. Hawley," the senior agent said. With steady hands, Jonas unfolded the deed and treaty papers. Nathaniel and Rose watched from nearby, standing proud beside Naya's tribal elders. The documents passed from hand to hand among the agents, who studied each carefully. Mayor Trumbull surged forward. "This is outrageous. You cannot possibly. These documents are authentic," the agent declared, silencing him. "The silver rights shall be jointly administered, benefiting both Silver Ridge and the Ute people." Cheers erupted through the courthouse. The mayor's face twisted in rage as he pushed through the crowd and disappeared. Jonas gripped Nathaniel's shoulder, tears welling in his eyes. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered. Beside them, Rose wiped her cheeks as Naya squeezed her hand, both girls beaming with joy. Justice had finally come to Silver Ridge. Spring sunshine warmed the weathered timbers of the lodge. Melting snow dripped steadily from the eaves as the sound of hammers rang through the crisp mountain air. Carpenters moved purposefully, replacing shattered windows and raising new barn frames against the brightening sky. Jonas stood on the front porch, his heart full. Through the open door, he could hear women's voices from the kitchen, the clatter of pots mixing with laughter. The aroma of baking bread drifted out. On the warm floorboards, 2 orphan boys played marbles while a widow mended clothes nearby. Inside, elders gathered near the great stone fireplace, sharing tales that bridged 2 peoples. Their words flowed like the creek below, carrying wisdom from generation to generation. On the broad steps, Nathaniel, Rose, and Naya huddled together, carefully carving their initials into the porch railing. Their quiet giggles rose like birdsong as they marked their place in the lodge's story. As evening settled over the ridge, Jonas gathered everyone for prayer. Firelight danced across faces both young and old as he gave thanks for their deliverance. His gaze rested on his children, and understanding filled his heart. The true treasure wasn't the silver sleeping beneath the mountain. It was this precious gift of faith, family, and healing among former strangers. Thanks for spending a moment here with me. If this story touched you, let's keep this connection going. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.